Chapter 9. Everybody knew, nobody knew. When people you don't know, people in whom you have no interest, people whose affairs you have never discussed, move away from your community, you don't notice that they are going or that they are gone. When, in addition, public opinion and the government itself has depreciated them, it is still likelier that you won't notice their departure, or if you do, that you will forget about it. How many of us whites in a white neighborhood are interested in the destination of a Negro neighbor whom we know only by sight and who has moved away? Perhaps he's been forced to move. At least the possibility occurs to us, and if we are particularly sensitive and we feel that perhaps a wrong has been done that we can't rectify, it is comforting to hear that the Negro was also a communist, or that he will be happier wherever he's gone with his own people, and was even paid a handsome bonus for moving. 4 of my 10 Nazi friends, the tailor and his son, the baker, and the bill collector, said that the only Jews taken to KZ, the concentration camp, were traitors. The rest were allowed to leave with their property, and when they had to sell their businesses, the courts, or the finance office, paid them the market value. I've heard that the Jews who left late could only take 50 or 100 marks with them, I said to the tailor, who was talking about the courts. I don't know about that, he said. How should I know about that? He had known a moment before about the courts, but I didn't remind him. I've heard, I said to Herr Simon, the bill collector, who was talking about the finance office, that they could only take part of their property with them. Well, why not, said Herr Simon. If they wanted to leave, the state had a right to share. After all, they had made their money here. The fact is, I think that my friends really didn't know. They didn't know because they didn't want to know, but they didn't know. They could have found out, at the time, only if they had wanted to very badly. And who wanted to? We whites, when the Negro moves away, do we want to find out why, or where, or with what he moved? The teacher, the student, the cabinet maker, and the bank clerk, these 4 at least, suspected the truth of the market value myth, and the policeman, to whom you or I would entrust our goods and our chattels without hesitation after 5 minutes of talk, spoke with contempt of the white Jews, the hawks who fell upon the property that the Jews had to sell in a hurry. 4 of my friends suspected the truth at the time. What should they have done? What would you have done, Herr Professor? Remember, the teacher accepted 9 of my 10 friends didn't know any Jews, and didn't care about what happened to them, and all this before Nazism. And it was their government now, which was carrying on this program under law. Merely to inquire meant to attack the government's justice. It meant risk, large or small, political or social, and it meant risk on behalf of people one didn't like anyway. Who but an ardent Christian, of the sort that takes Matthew 5 seriously, would undertake the risk of inquiring? Who, if injustice were to be discovered by inquiry, would undertake the penalty of protesting? I am sorry to say that none of my friends was that ardent a Christian. But cabinet-maker Klingelhofer, he who remained a vestryman of the church throughout Nazism, was as ardent a Christian as most vestrymen I have met, and his idea of relaxation during our conversations was to turn to religious questions. I know it's not what you're interested in, Herr Professor, but I'd like your views. One day, by way of relaxation, we went through Matthew 24 together. I didn't say that I was interested or that I wasn't, but I did say that reading aloud with a German friend improved my German. I read from the 9th through the 13th verses to improve my German. Then shall they deliver you up to the afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another. And many false prophets shall arise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. I stopped, looked up, then looked at Herr Klingelhofer. His head, this was my ebullient friend, my love for the fire department, was lowered. I waited. He said, without looking up, "That's hard. That's terribly hard. And it is hard. It is said to be hard to be a Christian, or even to want to be, under the most propitious of conditions. The conditions in Nazi Germany were not the most propitious. Just consider. Jews, because they were in such high proportion in the free professions, tended to be the people one owed money to for goods or services already delivered, for merchandise, say, or for medical care. Now I, in America, cannot well pay my doctor's bill. My doctor is a nice fellow, but his bills, however low they may be, are too high. I didn't want to be sick in the first place, and now that I'm well, I wish I hadn't had to buy the medical care I no longer need. I wish my doctor well, believe me, and my dentist, and my merchant, and my lawyer, and the jeweler who repaired my watch. If any of them are Jews, I still wish them well, because I am not anti-Semitic. Remember, my Nazi friends were. Now, let us imagine that the Jews are emigrating from America as fast as they can. They liquidate their assets at whatever loss, and collect such debts as collectible in a week or a month. Small debts they don't bother with. They may send out a bill with the word please written on it, but I can't pay it, not this month. What I can't avoid wondering is whether my Jewish dentist or doctor or shopkeeper is thinking of emigrating, winding up his affairs, closing his office or shop, selling out. I may still have to pay my debt someday, if he is able to sell his uncollected bills. Taking his whole family with him, losing his citizenship, and his power to pursue me with his bills. Of course, I'm a nice fellow too, so I say, I'll pay when I can. But I won't. I won't have to. And I know I won't have to. Although in my waking honorable hours, I may not know that I know I won't have to, but, oh, if that doctor and his bills, that dentist and his bills, only they didn't exist. A Jewish physician in Cronenberg emigrated in 1936. I was able to talk to him after I got back to America, and when I had asked him what decided his course in 1936, and he had given me the usual good reasons, he added, I remember the very occasion which fixed my decision. I was in the public telephone room at the Frankfurt Railroad station, and I heard a man in the next booth say, Don't pay him. Just don't pay him. Don't argue with him. Don't call him names. Don't waste your breath. Be polite, but don't pay him. Mark my words, in another 6 months or a year, you won't have to pay at all. Hold him off. It was something like that. Jew wasn't mentioned. I don't know who the man was or what he was talking about, but that decided me. It took 3-4 months to get a sponsor in America and get everything together. I sent bills out. Some were paid, some in full, some in part, and I collected more than half of what was owed me. After all, these people had been my patients, and they were decent people. And 1936 was still early. Later, of course, it was different. In 1934, I visited a family of remote relatives of mine in a country village outside Hanover. These Jews were small shopkeepers. They had been there for 7 centuries, and there were too few of them to constitute a formal Jewish community. There was no anti-Semitism in Eichdorff. There was no intermarriage either. In those first years of Nazism, their non-Jewish friends continued to trade with them openly, later secretly. Little children, it began with little children, who called them names on the street, were taken home and spanked. The villagers, except for a few officials and a few young rowdies, simply would not let Nazism have its way, not in Eichdorff. 9 years later, in 1943, the Jews of Eichdorff were sent away. In such a small community, they could not be sent unnoticed. After the war, one of their neighbors was telling me about it. Everybody knew, but nobody came out on the street. Some looked from behind their curtains. Not many. Did you? No. Why not? Why? What good is it to look? Cronenberg was, of course, bigger. None of my 10 friends ever saw any Jews leave in a group. It wasn't required that they see. Only policeman Hofmeister of the 10 knew the details of the departure of the Jews, and only of their departure, not of their destination. And only Herr Hildebrandt, the teacher, ever corresponded with any Jews afterwards or knew what had become of them. Everyone knew the Jews were moving away from 1933 on, and of my 10 friends, all of my 10 friends had heard that these Jews or those were going or gone. A Jewish woman came to Herr Wedekin's bakery to pay her bill and wanted to make sure there was nothing left owing him. You're leaving, he said. Yes, she said. That was all. 3 of my friends heard, during the war, that a busload of Jews had left the marketplace at dawn one day. That was all. Shortly after the war began, a group of Jews were seen working on the street, laying blocks in the trolley car track. Jews were now forbidden any but common labor. Hofmeister waved a greeting to some he knew, but didn't talk to them. Cabinet Klingelhofer spoke to one he knew, a lawyer who had been a customer of his. "Did you ask him how he happened to be there?" I said. "No, I knew." "How?" "Everybody knew." "How?" "Oh, we just knew." "What did you say to him?" "I asked him how he was, and he said, fine. He looked all right." "Did you shake hands with him?" "No, one doesn't shake hands with a man who is busy with both his hands." "No, not in America, but you Germans always shake hands so much, I thought maybe. By the way, Herr Klingelhofer, do you think you were brave to talk with him on the street?" "Brave? No, not brave. Maybe a little. No, not really. My loyalty was known." Herr Kessler, the unemployed bank clerk, risen to party speaker and department head in the local labor front, saw Stein on the Kronenberg platform waiting, as he himself was, for the northbound train. He had known Stein well, in a business way. Stein, to help him out when he was unemployed, had always hired him to audit the books of his dry goods store. The Jew was an old man. It was, when was it? Early in 1939. He pretended not to see me. Maybe he thought it would embarrass me, or that I wouldn't want to talk to him. That was wrong. I wasn't a fanatiker. Finally, I went up to him and shook hands and asked how he was. He said, fine. I couldn't ask how his business was, because I knew he had sold out. Then, when the train was coming, I said, "Are you going away, Herr Stein?" Of course he was going away, or I wouldn't have been waiting for the train, but a man may go away for a day or forever. I didn't ask that. I said, "Are you going away, Herr Stein?" And he said, yes. And then I said, "Well, goodbye," and held out my hand, but he had already turned away. "Did you both get on the train?" "Yes." "Together?" "No. He got on the non-smoker end of the car, and I got on the smoker." "Did you smoke?" "No." I did not initiate the discussion of the Jews with any of my 10 friends. Somewhere between the beginning of the second conversation and the end of the fourth, each of them introduced the subject, and each of them, except Messrs. Hildebrandt, Kessler, and Klingelhofer, reverted to it continually. I would ask Taylor Schwenke, "Did you like the program in 25? "The party program?" He would say, "Yes, it was very good, very. Take the Jewish question, for instance." In subsequent conversation, he said he had never seen the party program. Of 10 men, only the teacher, Hildebrandt, was not anti-Semitic. The policeman, a fine old man, did not want to be, but he was. The student, young Ruprecht, thought that he wasn't anti-Semitic, but in his case I am not all sure he was glib. Kessler and Klingelhofer, the 2 deepest feelings of my friends, except Hildebrandt, were the mildest. Their anti-Semitism was not at all racial, and almost entirely economic, rational. Klingelhofer's father, from whom the son had taken his trade as a cabinet maker, had told him the Jews were all right. They were people, like other people, but you couldn't trust them in money matters, that was all. If you went to a Jew to do business, that was one thing, but if a Jew came to you to do business, that was another. "Why do you suppose that was?" I said. I don't know. I remember my father telling me about Moses, whose leather shop was in the Bahnhofstrasse. My father did lots of work for him, and they got along fine. Moses only paid his accounts on Sunday mornings, and he always paid a round sum, no pfennig, and he always deducted 3%. Why? I don't know. That was his custom, I guess. So my father always arranged his accounts so that the 3% was already in. You may say cheating the cheater, but it wasn't like that exactly. Moses was a nice man. My father liked him. But my father always said you couldn't trust a Jew in money matters, and he was right. Were you ever cheated by a Jew? No, but that was because I was warned and was careful. If you're careful, you have no trouble with them. Were you careful with Professor Freudenthal? Freudenthal, who committed suicide in 1933, had been a customer of Herr Klingelhofer's and had sent him a wedding present, a piano shawl of which my friend was proud. No, with him you didn't have to be. The former bank clerk's thinking was much larger than the cabinet maker's. The Jews had accumulated too much of the country's economic power. They should have been reduced economically to their proper proportion in the population. And how should that have been done? That's what I don't know, but a way should have been found without depriving them of their citizenship or mistreating them. Did they exercise this power badly? In a way, I suppose anyone would, especially if he was looked down on, like the Jews, but it seemed to be very bad with the Jews. Do you mean that they introduced a Jewish spirit into economic life? I have heard other National Socialists say that. Well, that was propaganda, of course, part of the whole race thing. But I wouldn't say that. There is and there isn't a Jewish spirit, but certainly the aggressiveness and competitiveness of some Jews led to abuses. For instance, to pornography in the press just to sell papers and magazines. Of some Jews, I said. Ah yes, of some, not all. And of some non-Jews. Of course, that's why I don't like to speak of a Jewish spirit. But there were so many more Jews than non-Jews in those things proportionately. That's what I mean. Not one of my 10 friends had changed his attitude toward the Jews since the downfall of National Socialism. The 5 or 6, if young Ruprecht is included, who were extreme anti-Semites, were, I believe, not a bit more or less so now than before. What surprised me, indeed, was that with the war lost and their lives ruined, they were not more so. Certainly, Nazism's defeat by force would not make Nazis love the Jews more, if anything, less. Nor would their country's destruction, nor would the $750 million their conquerors compelled them to pay as restitutive damages to the Jews of Israel. And the 5 extremists had never seen the inside of the local America House or any other agency of re-education, and never would. They, and to a degree even the bank clerk, the cabinet maker, and the policeman, took the greatest pains to convince me that the Jews were as bad as the Nazis said they were. I sat passively, every so often asking a question, which betrayed my simple-mindedness, while my friends pressed their argument. If I diverted them, they came back to it. The one passion they seemed to have left was anti-Semitism, the one fire that warmed them still. I thought, as they went on, of the customary analysis. We have to justify our having injured those we have injured, or we have to persuade others to our guilty view in order to implicate them in our guilt. I thought a little, but I didn't say much. What could I have said?